Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Sukkah Daf Mem is entirely about halachos of Shemitah and proper use of Shemitah produce. As we had said, Shemitah has Kedusha. The Torah says it should be lachem la'achal, it should be for you for eating. You're not allowed to use it for other things. The Gemara is going to discuss two primary machlokas. One is a machlokas as to what else you're allowed to do with it besides eating, what's included. The second machlokas is how does that Kedusha transfer to money, to other things. We'll focus on both of these. So first of all, we begin by discussing the lulav. We had seen in our last daf that a lulav is not considered to have Kedusha as Shemitah, and the Gemara, they were struggling to figure out why. The Gemara here asks, what's the problem? A lulav is wood. Kedusha Shemitah applies to fruits. It says that you're not allowed to, it says that you have to keep special halachas for Shemitah because it's supposed to be eaten, but a lulav is not eaten. So the Gemara says, we could prove this from a Mishnah, the Gemara says that if you gather together reeds or leaves or things like that, so if you're planning to burn them, there's no Kedusha, and if you're planning to use it for food, then there is Kedusha. So again, a lulav is a piece of wood, so it should not have Kedusha Shemitah. That should be the simple explanation for why the Mishnah on the previous daf assumes that a lulav does not have Kedusha Shemitah. Why is that not valid? So the Gemara answers because the use of a lulav for a mitzvah of Shemitah, for a mitzvah of using 4 minim on Sukkot is the type of usage which is permitted for Shemitah use, and it does count as something that there is mitzvahs kedushas Shemitah. The way that we set up what has kedushas Shemitah and what does not is as follows. The Torah says that you have to use Shemitah things lachem la'achlo, and we say that lachem dumya del achla has to be yours, any use for you, like any use for eating. So we establish it as follows. Any use which you get the benefit from the object while it's being destroyed, that counts like eating. That's something which is restricted in Kedushas Shemitah. Any use which you get the benefit after the object is destroyed, that has no Kedusha Shemitah. If that's what you have, if that's what you're using it for, there's no Shemitah Kedusha there. Of course, and if it's fruit, then it's forbidden to use it for that purpose. Now, a lulav that's being used for the mitzvah of lulav, you get the benefit from it while you're using it. You pick up the lulav, you use it, you get the benefit right away on the spot. However, firewood that you're burning, you don't get any benefit from it until after it's destroyed. After it becomes burned and becomes coals, then it gives you heat. So therefore, there's no halacha of Kedusha Shemitah on firewood. There is a halacha on Kedusha Shemitah on lulav that is set aside for the mitzvah of Shemitah. So Gemara asks, even firewood, it does have a situation in which you get benefit while you're burning it, and that's if it's a very oily piece of wood, and it burns brightly, and you can use it for light. So while it's burning, you get light. You don't have to wait for the coal stage for it to give you heat to get benefit from it. So the Gemara says, look, when you set aside something for wood, it's usually used for firewood, not for torchwood. So therefore, we view it by the general halachos of firewood, which are that you don't get benefit from it until after it's destroyed, and therefore Kedusha Shemitah doesn't apply to it. Now we get to our first machlokas of the daf, and that is, what are you allowed to use Shemitah produce for? The Torah says two conflicting words. It says it should be used lachem, for you. That seems to indicate any use that you need. But it also says la'achla, to eat. That limits it to eating. So how do we find the balance between lachem and la'achla? So the Gemara brings two opinions. Rabbi Yaisi and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yaisi says you are allowed to use it to put in a pool where you're soaking clothing or cloth. You could use it for coloring the cloth, you could use it for spicing the cloth, whatever. So you're allowed to put it in this soaking pool and this washing pool. And the Chachamim say you're not allowed to do that. So that's the machlekes. You're allowed to do that or not. So Gemara says, how do they arrive at their opinions? So they both are trying to find the balance between lachem and la'achla. The Tanna Kama says that you're not allowed to use it in your cloth soaking pools is based on what we've said before. You don't get any pleasure out of it until after it's destroyed. It gets destroyed in the soak. It gets mashed up and put into the right. You would use grape wine to put in the pool, for example, to help stain your clothing the color that you want it to be. So you only get the benefit from it after it's destroyed. That doesn't count as a food benefit. That's excluded. The only things which count are la'achla and lachem. The combination of the two, shomi, has to be something where you're getting benefit while it's being destroyed and not later, just like we said before. Now, Rabbi Yossi rejects that. Rabbi Yossi says, no, that's included in lachem. Washing, staining, these are all included in lachem uses, things which you need, and therefore they are included. What's excluded? Melugma, using it for a medicinal purpose. That you're not allowed to do. That's a violation of Shemitah rules. Now, why do I exclude medicinals? So the Gemara says, because all the other things, Rabbi Yossi explains, all the other things are common needs that everybody has. And that's what's called lachem. That's what's called that you're allowed to use it for your own purposes. Medicine, that's only somebody who's sick or injured. There, it does not count. That's only for individuals, and therefore that doesn't count as lachem. And the Gemara calls it brisa. And the Gemara says this brisa has to be the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. The brisa says you're only allowed to eat Shemitah fruit. You're not allowed to use it as medicine. You're not allowed to use it as sprinkling on the floor of your house so that you have a good smell, that you would sprinkle wine around the house. You're not allowed to use it to make a type of potion which people drink to make themselves vomit when they ate too much. So again, this is like Rabbi Yossi. It clearly says you're not allowed to use it for medicine, but the implication is you are allowed to use it for soaking and for pools and for staining and dyeing, and therefore that does not fit in the Chachamim. Okay, now the Gemara gets to the next machlokas, which is how do you transfer kedusha from Shemitah fruits to something else? Now the halacha is as follows, as the Gemara spells out. When you buy Shemitah fruits with money, kedusha goes onto the money, but it doesn't go off the Shemitah fruits. The Shemitah fruits stay with their kedusha. It goes onto the money, and then if you use that money to buy something else, it goes onto something else. Here it goes off the money. Meaning it always stays on the original Shemitah fruits, but anything secondary, it goes off and it transfers from the next to the next to the next to the next. You buy something else, the kedusha transfers to that. Whatever you swap, it exchanges for. So the Gemara says that the opinion of Rabbi Elazar is that you can only transfer kedusha Shemitah from one thing to another by purchasing. If you take money and you buy it, the kedusha goes from the money to the food, and then you sell that food. The kedusha goes from the food to the next money that you used to buy it. Rabbi Yochanan says no. You could do something called chilul. You could transfer the kedusha. You could take two things and say, here's one thing, here's another thing. I want the kedusha to go off this onto that. Now in karbanos, you always find that. In karbanos, you're allowed to transfer kedusha from one thing to another. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's the same as karbanos. According to Rabbi Elazar, it is different than karbanos. You can only transfer by sale. Okay, now the Gemara gives the sources of each opinion, what each one does with the other one's source, and two brises, one which seems to go like each opinion. So first of all, what's the source of each opinion? So the Gemara says that Rabbi Eliezer learns that it has to be sold because the Torah discussing Yovel, and Yovel is the same halacha says Shemitah, says B'shnas Yovel Azois. Right afterwards it says V'chisimkeru mimkar, when you'll sell a sale. That the juxtaposition, putting these two psukim together, is to teach you that you can only transfer kedusha ashriyas through a sale. Now, Rav Yochanan says, no, that pasuk is coming to teach me something else. That pasuk is coming to teach me a statement of Yisrael Chanina, that somebody who violates Shemitah rules will end up having to sell all his possessions. That's why it says you're going to sell right after it discusses Kedusha Shvius. Now what's Rav Yechanan's source? His source is again from the Pasuk of Yovel. It says Ki Yovel hi Kodesh Yelchem. It calls it Kodesh. Kodesh sounds like a karbanos. Therefore it should have the same halachos as karbanos, and so we learn from karbanos, just like a karbanos, you could transfer kedusha without selling. You could just do what's called chilul. You could be mechalal. You could take the kedusha off something and transfer it onto something else. You could do that for Shemitah as well. Now, what is Rav Yechon going to do with what is Rabbi Elazar going to do with that pasuk? He holds you can't just transfer kedusha. So he says it's coming to teach me ki yevel hi kodesh. It's coming to teach me that the kedusha is transferable. It's only transferable through a sale, but it is transferable. That's where we need to learn that from that altogether. Okay, now the Gemara says I have a brisa like each one. I have a Tana like each one. I have a brisa like Rabbi Elazar that says you can only transfer kedusha through sale, not through anything else. The brisa is a lengthy brisa discussing transferring of kedusha of Shemitah, and it only talks about sales. It doesn't talk about anything else. What does the brisa say? It says that Shviyas, the kedusha of Shviyas goes on to the money that you use to buy fruits, like it says Ki yovel hi kodesh yelchem. That's what we had just said is where he learns that halacha from. Just like you can transfer kedusha of korbanos, you can transfer kedusha of shemitah. And the original fruits stay with their kedusha. It just transfers on to further things as well. Now the Brisa describes how it works, like we said in our introduction. You may think that the original fruits lose their kedusha. Therefore, the Torah says, "Kodesh tihiyeh, b'haviyasa tehei." It should stay. It should stay holy. It'll always be holy. It'll never lose that kedusha. How does it work? So the Brisa describes if you purchase, if you have shemitah fruits and you use them to buy meat, so the kedusha is on both of them. The shemitah fruits stay with their kedusha, and the meat gets kedusha. Now, if you use that meat and use it to buy fish, then it goes off the meat and onto the fish. You use the meat to buy wine, it goes off the meat onto the wine. It goes off the fish onto the wine. You use the wine to buy oil, it goes off the wine onto the oil. Each one keeps transferring. Whatever is last is what has the kedusha, and the shemitah fruits always has kedusha. So again, the proof is from the fact that it keeps saying you buy. It doesn't say anything about transferring without purchasing. Now, however, we do have a brisa that goes like Rabbi Yochanan, which discusses the halachas of transferring kedusha, and it does say that you can transfer. This brisa says that both shemitah and ma'aser sheni can have their kedusha transferred, uses the word mischalelin, to an animal, a bird, or a wild animal, whether they're alive or they're slaughtered. That's according to Rabbi Meir. The Chachamim say you cannot transfer it on live ones, only on slaughtered ones. Slaughtered ones we know you could eat. Kedusha. If you do live ones, they may give birth to other animals, and those animals will also have kedusha. You'll end up with total flocks of animals running around with kedusha. That's shemitah or kedusha ma'aser sheni on them. We don't want that to happen. And that's the source. Now the Gemara just says on this machlokes here between Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim whether or not you're allowed to transfer kedusha as shemitah and ma'aser sheni onto live animals. The only machlokes is about males. Females you certainly don't want because they will certainly be used to make flax. Males you may not have the machlokes is will you be making flax of kedushas shemitah or ma'aser sheni based on this male animal. That's what the machlokes is.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.